Right, welcome back everyone to ISO 20 tutoring. Today we're going to be focusing on quadratics. So I guess the first question is, what is a quadratic equation? And so a quadratic equation is any equation where the highest power of x is simply x squared. So one example of a quadratic equation could be, for example, x squared minus 3x plus 2, for example. So another example could be, for example, let's go for x squared. We'll go for 2x squared plus 5x minus 4. Okay, so if I had, for example, the equation 3x cubed minus 7x squared plus 3, this actually would not be a quadratic equation. And a lot of people think that because we've got an x squared term, it's going to be a quadratic. However, because we've got an x cubed term, it wouldn't be called a quadratic equation, and hence it would instead be called a cubic equation. Okay, so the typical kind of shape that a quadratic equation would have on a graph is what we call a parabola, which you might have seen in class as either a smiley face looking like that, or you could have a frowny face which looks a bit like this. So those are the two typical kind of shapes that you would usually see for a quadratic equation. And so there are three different ways that we can solve a quadratic equation. So the first one, the most basic one, is called factorization. So number two is something that we like to call the quadratic formula. Which can come in very handy when you're doing a calculator paper. And then we've also got the third and final technique that a lot of students will forget, is you can also complete the square. Completing the square, which is often abbreviated to CTS. Okay, so factorization, that's basically just putting an expression back into brackets. Quadratic formula is something that comes in very handy when you're doing a calculator paper, and if the coefficient of x squared is greater than 1, it's most likely that the quadratic formula would be your best way of solving that quadratic equation. So completing the square is also quite a tricky technique, but in future videos we will be going through how to complete the square for different quadratic equations. So here's a very brief introduction to quadratics. In future videos we'll be going through how to solve different quadratic equations, linear equations, and a whole lot more topics. So obviously if you have any questions, don't be afraid to comment in the comment section, or DM us on Insta or Facebook, or simply email us, or check out our TikTok as well. So you'll get your quickest replies on Insta as well. So hopefully that helps, and see you next time.